Okay, let's see. Can you hear me? Okay, seems like we are here. It's just me at the moment and probably just me for the duration. I'm going to give people just a second to see if anyone shows up. If anyone wants to ask me some questions. Otherwise, we'll start with the lecture. Go to share screen. And that. My, my thumbnail. Okay, so this is a test run on doing, um, doing this particular lecture just to see how it goes. And so we're going to be talking about Paleolithic and Neolithic art and the transition from them. And this is the first place we start in class. We every unit we have an art historical topic that we cover, and we have an art medium topic that we cover, and then we have a um, uh, a design concept that we cover, and then we also have kind of like a theme that we cover all through each unit, and they all kind of tend to relate to each other. So logically, the very first art historical period that we're going to cover is the very beginning. So the very beginning of human art making. And so here I'm talking about Paleolithic art and Neolithic art. And if you look at your notes, you can see that I have information about what do we mean when we say Paleolithic? Paleolithic is divided up into three periods: the lower Paleolithic, the middle Paleolithic, and the upper Paleolithic. And then there's another period called the Mesolithic that exists between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic. There's a lot of lithics in there. What does that mean? So Paleolithic literally means old stone. Neolithic means new Stone Age. So it's like old Stone Age, new Stone Age. Mesolithic means in the middle, so middle Stone Age. Okay. Um, and when we're talking about Paleolithic art and Paleolithic human culture, what are we talking about? We'll get into that. And then what are the examples of Paleolithic art that we look at and that we need to know? And then what are we talking about when we talk about Neolithic culture and Neolithic art? So that's basically what we're covering in this lecture. So some of the things we need to know about Paleolithic culture before we even start talking about Paleolithic art. Number one, Paleolithic period was very long. And even the period that includes that we know definitely we have, evidence that human beings existed is also very long, 300,000 years. Um, and even if we just zoom in on the period where we know that human beings, Homo sapiens, were making culture, making physical culture, and specifically art culture. So not just like stone axes, but like making jewelry and doing paintings on cave walls and carving into cave walls and stuff like that. That's still 50,000 years. That is a huge amount of time compared to all of human history, like the actual recorded history is 6,000 years at the most. Okay. So 50,000 years is a really long time. And then the other thing to remember is that it's a very, very poorly documented time. That for the vast majority of these peoples, we have no idea who they were. We only have small bits of evidence. And so it's easy to kind of think of Paleolithic as like a single culture, the Paleolithic culture or the Neolithic culture. But there was no single, right, culture. In fact, probably there are hundreds of thousands or millions of cultures that have existed in this vast time period. and we only get little bit snapshots of some of them. Okay, so that's our first kind of caveat, and but we have the basic dates here, and we do know that mostly because we have very little evidence of any kind of settled existence. These people lived a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle where they followed herds of animals in hunting patterns. They were possibly matriarchal. We have some evidence, but I don't think that we could even say that's likely. It's just a possibility. Okay. So some of the earliest Paleolithic art that we have includes some um, some jewelry, like things like these marine shell beads right here. Um, People making things into necklaces. And then also we have examples of engravings into cave walls, like where people carve into them, and not examples of painting on on cave walls. And these engravings on cave walls, we're not sure which ones were by Homo sapiens and which ones were by our nearest relatives, which could include Neanderthals and Denisovans. And then we also have the very beginnings of painting on cave walls as well. So when we're talking about cave paintings, although there are other sites, we primarily focus on three main sites from Europe, and that would be, and one of the reasons why we focus on them is because we also have a lot of other related artifacts to these sites, and we have enough kind of just evidence, whether it's enough in terms of human remains, in terms of evidence of campsites and so forth. We have enough evidence to kind of like piece together a sense of cultures here. But anyway, Chauvet is the oldest, but discovered the most recent, Lascaux and Altamira in the northern part. The first two are in France, and Altamira is in Spain, relatively near France. And besides cave paintings that we're going to be looking at, we also have examples of small figurines and small kind of carvings, and we'll talk more about them, especially in terms of the Venus figurines. So Chauvet Cave is an amazing um, cave network. Um, there's a fantastic documentary about Chauvet Cave called Cave of Forgotten Dreams. I totally recommend watching it. And so it's the oldest site that we have evidence of in Europe. There is, as I saw in the earlier slide, there is some cave painting in, and this is in Indonesia, Sulawesi, and that's from like 37,000 or 38,000 BCE. Oh, we should go to slideshow. There we go. I knew something was off. So there we go. This is what all these pages look like full screen. Okay. And yeah, the from Chauvet, the main thing that you need to know is the Wall of Lions, and um, which is a pretty amazing shot, and we can talk about that some more at the end of the lecture. Besides the cave paintings, you do need to know about the Venus figurines. So the thing about the Venus figurines that's one of the things that's interesting is that they span all the way from relatively the middle of the upper Paleolithic. So um, about 25,000 BCE, they go all the way, well, actually all the way to like 30,000 BCE, but they go all the way to through the Mesolithic and even to kind of like the time period when in some places the Neolithic is beginning. And another thing that's interesting is that they all share kind of certain similarities, but they also vary greatly. We see cultures seem to explore different degrees um, of abstraction. So we have like a figure like this that's extremely abstract. They're also really significant because yeah, they're just a window into what these cultures are like. Some of them are perforated, meaning they have holes in them and they seem to be clearly designed to be worn, but not all of them. There were other kinds of carved figurines, mostly figurines of animals, but also things like this lion-headed man figurine right there. And now we're starting to talk about the transition into the Mesolithic and then into the Neolithic. And I include both of these two images just to give you a sense of um, that the artwork was moving in that direction. And when we look at the Neolithic art, you'll start to see that some of this is a little bit of a precursor. So what do we mean when we're talking about the Neolithic? So first of all, I guess we need to understand what do we mean by the Mesolithic. So the Mesolithic is the middle Stone Age. And in the Mesolithic, people started to be more settled down. We don't have any evidence of full year-round occupation of any sites that we know of in the Mesolithic, but we definitely have places where people would return year after year and stay potentially months out of a year at a particular site, and they would build kind of like structures and settlements. So that was already happening in the Mesolithic. Um, and there's an indication of people very much kind of like um, not quite agriculture, but like um, taking advantage of all of the resources available in particular sites. The main definition of Neolithic is the invention of agriculture. So with when we get to the Neolithic, we're looking at places where people are settled and living in those sites year round, and um, and that uh, they are farming, meaning that instead of just gathering grains, they are actually reseeding those grains, potentially even breeding those grains to make them more abundant. And then they're also storing grains. Uh, okay. One of the main sites that we look at for the Neolithic is Catalhoyuk, which is a site in Turkey in the southern part, kind of near, relatively near to where Syria is. And and this area was kind of like a lot of the early Neolithic cultures coming out of this region. And one of the things that's interesting about the site of the of Paleolithic is that this particular community came up with their own kind of solution for building, where they basically just sort of they built all their buildings sort of on top of each other. So every living spaces for all the buildings were on the second floor, and all the there is no roads, right? Every building is butted up right next to the next overbuilding, and so to get through the city, you have to kind of like walk through people's roofs, um, and so it's in a way, it's kind of like a way of having kind of a fortified town. It's not really a city, it's a town, but a fortified town because there is no way to get in other than up. And another thing that about Calhoun is, and this is not the only place where we see this reoccurring in multiple Neolithic types of cultures and communities, the idea where they would, on a site, they would periodically burn and flatten everything all the buildings that they had built and then build on top of that structure so that they would kind of like keep building. Um, and this would lead to certain places in the Levant and in Turkey having these really large hills called tells. Okay. So one of the artworks that we see um, from this kind of like Katowice and from other kind of places is more kind of art that is on kind of like this mother goddess figurine. And it raises the question as to whether this is a continuation from the Venus fertility figurine. Let's go back for a second and look at that. So we don't really know what these fertility figurines are about. We can only guess. And one of the main theories is that they are fertility, right? That they are about because they seem to be accentuating the uh, uh, the mothering and birthing parts of a female anatomy, right? That emphasizing that purpose, since they seem to be about being well fed and being fertile. That is one guess as to what they are about. It's kind of like And so one possibility is that they are a representation of some sort of like Earth Mother goddess, but it is also possible that they're simply just representations of like a good luck charm of like of being fertile, of surviving childbirth. So we don't know exactly what they're about, but there does seem to be this kind of continued um, interest in the idea. And here, especially with this one, it does seem much more like potentially like a goddess figurine, because not only is she kind of exaggerated in terms of her anatomy, but she is also seated on a throne and flanked by two lionesses or maybe leopards, and that seems to be much more kind of like an association with kind of like a goddess type figure. And so it's a possibility that this kind of culture is in some ways a continuity of that of the Paleolithic culture, but we don't know for certain. Here's some more examples of some Neolithic art, and some that you really well. One that you really need to know is the ibex speaker that might show up on tests. It is one of the oldest of a 4,200, one of the oldest fired ceramic vessels we have. And so the last thing I want to talk about is some new things that we have learned about the Neolithic, especially with the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, this particular site right here, and then about some of the other sites that we've been exploring related to it. This is also in that region, more towards the east of where Catalhoyuk is, but still in kind of the region of southern Turkey, relatively near where Syria is. And in Göbekli Tepe, we find evidence of people much earlier than we thought, living not exactly settled communities, but having at least a settled um, architecture. So these appear to be religious structures, um, but they don't appear to be settled communities. Although there are other places that we looked at where there are both these kinds of religious structure, kind of round house, kind of meeting halls like these, but also then year-round living places as well. Not quite as old as 10,000, but like at 9,000 BCE. So what a lot of this new discoveries is really emphasizing is something that I emphasized at the very beginning of the lecture, which is that there, maybe I should have emphasized, that there, although we have these names for these different periods, this is all about continuity. So there is no real boundary between the Mesolithic and the Neolithic, right? If one leads right into each other, and there's no boundary between the um, Upper Paleolithic and the Mesolithic, right? That these people were in this slow kind of transition, culture by culture, right? Slowly shifting their idea of how much human culture involved more stuff and more actions, activities beyond just simply hunting and gathering, and and that there is therefore no real kind of like, when we used to talk about the Neolithic as the Neolithic Revolution, right? Where the invention of agriculture completely transformed all of society. But now we're starting to understand that it was a much more slow process with where it starts and stops, and that there was no real um, solid boundary between one to the other. Okay, I think that is the end of this lecture. Did anyone join me? No, no one joined me, but that's fine. So this was a test just to see how well this would go. And it took exactly 20 minutes, which it was supposed to take. If there was anyone watching, I would at this point answer some questions. Ooh, so we can do that. And hold on a second. I'm going to stop share. And Jasmine, I see you. You're mute right now, but okay, there you are. Hello, Jasmine.
Oh, hi.
I was just doing a test on the first lecture, and I just kind of actually finished it, but I could go over it again if you wanted to, or answer any of your questions that you have. Um, I'm, like I said, I'm doing these two lectures today just as kind of a test to see if just make sure everything is working, but also to see if I could kind of like time in. My goal through this summer session is to do some lectures every day, that people can watch, or you can just wait for me to post them later. I have
Okay.
for all of these lectures, I have older versions. I just wanted to make newer versions just to make sure that I'm absolutely as up to date as possible. Um, so the very first lecture of the course is on Paleolithic art, like so basically cave painting and the kinds of small little figurines that people 40,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago were making, and just talking a little bit about that. Do you want to see the lecture, or you want to just wait until class starts officially?
I can wait. I just didn't know if it was going over. I was gonna try to tune in because I didn't know if they was gonna be recorded and we can watch them after. I just happened to have been off today. So that
Yes,
because I know that I work 12-hour shifts, so I didn't know how
got it.
lectures and stuff was gonna be. Also I am not artistic at all. I just had to have another appreciation class. So how is the grading for these crafts that we gotta do?
Right. Yes. I am very forgiving, and you do not have to be brilliant at art. Like, certainly being gifted at art helps, but you don't have to be brilliant at art. You just, if you're, if you just put in the time, and try to be careful and neat, have clean craft, you should be doing fine. Like, um, and like there's a ton of extra credit opportunities in the class, both in terms of in art activities, but also in other types of extra credit. So, even if you struggle with, let's say, the art assignments or with the design sketches, you can make up those points elsewhere. So, um, you should, I think, on one of the messages under announcements that I wrote something like about the for the last 3 years I'm teaching, over 50% of my class generally gets an A or a B, and really it's probably closer to over 60%.
Okay.
And so, I'm not like it's not a scary grading system. It's just mostly the only way people you know do bad in the class is by missing assignments. And
Okay.
I try to give you as much time as possible.
Okay.
Um, And actually, one thing that, and I'm going to put this in announcements and messages later, but I actually have kind of like scaled back a little bit the class. I've taken out some assignments, and I've taken um, I've reduced one of the units. We only do 9 units for the semester, and all of this is to try to make sure that it's a little bit easier to get everything done in the 5 weeks.
Summer. Okay. So
Yeah,
are we gonna go to 5 weeks? I had seen your email where you said some people had responded, some people didn't.
right. As
I know I
if
responded and said I'm fine with moving.
Right. If basically if I have anyone say absolutely I can't, I have to do it as a full, then we will do it as a full. Um,
Okay.
but if as long as everyone who responds by, 4 o'clock or so tomorrow, as long as everyone who responds says that they're fine with it, then we'll go ahead and switch.
Okay.
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 Um, yeah, do you have any other questions?
I don't think so because I've been working on it. I just ordered the book because I was working on assignments and seeing that I needed the book for a good bit of stuff, but I found it on Amazon for like $12, so it wasn't bad.
Okay. Which did you get which
I think
edition?
it's the eighth edition.
Okay, good.
Cause
Yeah.
I just got the one because I seen on your um the thing you sent out, the required like materials and stuff with our stuff, it had like both editions on there, but then I seen on like step question or prompt 7, it had the 8th edition book and it had the ICSBN on there. So I just went on and went with that one since the ICBM number was on there.
Right. Yeah. I tried to like the point is that I want to make it, as easy and inexpensive for everybody. And for some people, if you have to get through the bookstore for various reasons, or if like if you're part of the W Books, ooh, we have another person. If you're part of the W Books system, then it might make a
Hmm.
lot more sense for you to go ahead and just go with the 13th edition and do it electronically. But for some
Okay.
people, especially people who are like paying for their books out of pocket, it just makes a lot
Hmm.
more sense to get it online and get the 8th edition.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
and I do provide the page numbers. And let's see, um, I see you, Akira. I do provide the page numbers in all of them. Like I have, because I just keep adding it. Because every time they change the edition, I have to add new page numbers. So there's like 8th edition, 11th edition, 12th edition, and 13th edition.
Oh, okay.
So technically, like you could get any of those, but I particularly prefer the 8th edition. The 8th edition, I just like it a little better. I think it's a little bit better written. But
Okay.
there are some things I like some of the artwork that they've chosen for the newer editions, especially the 13th edition. It's like really pretty. Um, Akira, can you hear me? And is that the right way to pronounce your first name?
Hey, it's Akira, and I hear
Akira.
you. My surroundings are kind of loud, so that's why I'm on mute. But
Okay.
I hear you though.
Okay. Excellent. So, Akira, if what we just covered, I did the very first lecture, the Paleolithic to Neolithic art lecture, and I could always redo it if you wanted me to. Um, but I'm going to post the video later, and all of my videos are posted on YouTube and then linked to pages, so you can then see them. And and yeah, and then I've just been answering some questions that Jasmine has been asking. Do either of you have any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, Jasmine, are you good? We were actually, Akira, we were just talking about the textbook. Are you clear on the textbook and your options on what to do with the textbook?
I pick up my textbooks today actually. So,
Okay,
but
so are you picking them up from the bookstore?
yes,
Okay, in person?
yes.
Okay. So yeah, if you, I basically give you the option of like different, you could go with the old edition, the 8th edition, or you could go with the absolute newest edition, the 13th. And that's mostly so that you have flexibility as to whatever would save you the most money. But I provide you the reading pages for whichever edition you're in. You should always be able to find it. Now, one thing I will say is sometimes on some of the homeworks, there are questions that are specific to the 8th edition that like when they rewrote the book at the 11th or at the 12th edition, they took out that interesting little tidbit. Um, and so you might have to sometimes like go back to PDFs that you find on the Canvas page to find the answers to some of those particular questions. Um, but I I try also not to penalize you if you can't find them because some people may not be using the 8th edition. Okay,
I found
so
the Akira. I found the Amazon. It may be cheaper if you want to. I found the 8th edition on Amazon. It's the used book for $12
yeah,
because I had to buy my books out of pocket and I don't get them at the school.
yeah, they used to be meant inflation. The 8th edition used to be just only like 4 years ago or so used to be available at like $4.
Oh wow.
So like even with shipping, like you pay $4 shipping, you were like all you were spending was $8 total. Um, it's not quite that cheap anymore, but still, yeah, $12 compared to buying like the textbook new. Um, Now, Akira, you might go with, do you do the W Books plan?
Yes, the W books, yes.
Okay, so that might save you some money. And then you might find that if you go with like renting the electronic book, that could also, the electronic version of it, that could save you some money. I'm okay with any option. I myself, myself personally, I prefer having the physical book in hand, and I think you learn more. Like one of the things I like about having the physical book is that because we kind of like the way I use the textbook, we jump around from section to section. I don't ask you to read everything in the textbook. I just ask you to read the parts of the textbook that are on topics exactly related to what I'm covering in my lectures. Um, and so when we're all done, you've probably read maybe somewhere between 40 to 50% of the book. So there's like a solid another 50% of the book that you just haven't even read. But by having the physical book, you're flipping through it and you're seeing those sections that you're not, that maybe you're not assigned to read that time. And you get to peruse them a little bit. And most importantly, you get to look at the artwork. Because like a lot of that artwork all through the book is really interesting to look at. So that's one of the reasons why I like having the physical book. All right. Um, so any other questions for me?
No, sir.
Okay. So at 1 o'clock, I'm going to do another test doing the same sort of thing. And right at the start, I'm going to, if no one shows up, I'm going to get right into the lecture. The lecture in that case is it's basically going to be the intro lecture for the class where I just kind of like introduce the class and I'll then go into talking about how to use the Canvas page. And I'll just kind of like share screen and go through the Canvas page part by part just to make sure everyone knows where everything is. That's all covered under announcements as well, but for some people actually seeing it physically, like seeing me able to point and say, pages, this is where you'll find the videos, go to here for this kind of stuff, um, helps people realize what it is they know and what they don't know.
I do have another question.
Okay.
Are you gonna have all the assignments like open for us to like do and turn in at our leisure as long as they're in by the due date? Or are you gonna just open stuff up like at a week or two at a time?
I try to I try not to have them open all at the same time because like that does kind of panic some students, but I try to open them pretty early. So yeah, so that it encourages you to work ahead. Um, and and then on top of that, you can even though under assignments, like let's say everything for unit 1 and unit 2 is going to open up like tomorrow, right, at 12 a.m. And then some of the stuff for unit 3 is going to open up by like Thursday, I think. So, giving you more time. But if you really want to work far ahead, if you go to modules, you can see everything for the whole course, right? And you can find the homework assignment for unit 7, let's say, um, right away if you want to. And you can always, um, you know, especially if you wanted to turn stuff in early or if you had to turn stuff in late, you can always submit an assignment by sending it to me in Canvas messaging. So like,
Okay.
if you like just downloaded the Word document from modules and you just filled it in and then sent it to me as a file um, in Canvas messaging, that could also work. So, okay, that was a
Okay.
good
Thank
question.
you.
Akira, do you have any final questions before we end this meeting?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, pleasure to speak to you both. Have you both sent me emails already?
Yes.
Okay. And you're both okay with
Yes.
us doing this as a 5-week summer session 1 class rather than a full session?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's hope that everyone else responds and we don't have anyone going, no, I need it to be for 10 weeks. And okay, I will speak to you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.